How's it going, Diablo fans? Today I'm showing you my updated Ice-Shards build, which is now tier 100 ready. This build is great because you can build it right at level 60 and you can play it all the way up to Nightmare tier 100. And it works great throughout your entire leveling journey up to level 100. It is very easy to build, has minimal gear requirements, does not require any unique items, and also it does not require so much high-level Paragon glyphs. You can easily get away with having low-level glyphs and using the level 15 glyphs. There is a substantial weakness of this build though, and I have to admit the build is really bad on fighting bosses. It's alright if you're doing lower level Nightmare Dungeon to like level 60, 70, maybe 80. Level 90 it starts to get frustrating. The boss HP is like so overtuned and the Ice-Shards damage just cannot deal with that. And I feel like to make this build constantly beat tier 100 bosses in a reasonable amount of time, you would need a lot of unique items to make this happen. Don't get me wrong, you can still farm the Nightmare dungeons. There's 5 dungeons which do not have a boss at the end, and these usually play like a breeze. And I'm not really having trouble finding enough of those dungeons. But yeah, you can see at the end I will put a boss fight at the very end of the last Nightmare dungeon. And remember, you can find all the links to the specific sections of this guide, to the updated planner build on max roll, as well as all the other information about this build in the description down below. Before we get into the skills, the skill tree, the legendary aspects, the item and stat priorities, the Vampiric Powers and the Paragon Board, let's do a brief summary on the synergies of the build and how they work together. Our main damage source here in this build is Ice-Shards using the Ice-Shards Enchantment and Frozen Orb using the Frozen Orb Enchantments, and we max out both skills to take the most advantage out of it. The beauty of this build that it's so simple, pretty much we don't really care about anything, all we do is build Lucky Hit, that's it. So to really make it simple, Lucky Hit is pretty much the only stat we care. We don't care about crit damage, we don't care about crit chance, we don't care about vulnerable. We really don't have any requirements in our gear other than Lucky Hit. And because we don't really have a lot of main stat requirements, we can then put all the other secondary stats on our gear, like we can get cooldown reduction, we can get mana cost reduction, we can get resource generation, we can get defensives and resistances of our armor pieces. You can pretty much get all the secondary stats you want, because we don't really need to focus on primary damage stats here. So what do we need all this Lucky Hit for? First of all, we need it for our mana regeneration. This build is avalanche based, so it makes our Ice-Shards free to cast based on Lucky Hit. And also we use the Frigid Breeze passive, which also gives us mana regeneration based on Lucky Hit whenever we hit a vulnerable enemy. We use Lucky Hit for the Ravenous Vampiric Power, which essentially gives us a very high attack speed here. And furthermore, we also use Lucky Hit to fuel the Accursed Touch Vampiric Power. This is going to put Vampiric Curse on every single enemy. And killing enemies afflicted by Vampiric Curse pretty much stores their soul, and then whenever you cast a defensive skill, it sends out these ghosts which automatically target enemies, and when they reach an enemy they explode in like an AoE blood explosion thing. Furthermore, a very important part is that all enemies afflicted by the curse are vulnerable, because we use the prey on the weak Vampiric Power here. That means we can actually skip some of the regular vulnerable mechanics for the Frost Sorc and do something different. Because we don't need Ice-Shards anymore to apply vulnerable, we can actually switch from destructive Ice-Shards over to greater Ice-Shards. And greater Ice-Shards actually is incredibly good. Before you used to never use it because you pretty much had to use the destructive ones, but now we can use greater ones, and that's just gonna shoot your Ice-Shards all over the place by itself. Since all enemies are vulnerable all the time, we can use additional synergies to greatly boost our damage. These synergies are the new Icefall legendary node, and that's going to boost our damage by 15% or 30% against frozen, and enemies here are pretty much frozen all the time. Furthermore, we get another 16% damage against vulnerable enemies from the prey on the weak Vampiric Power. We take another 10% from the exploit glyph, and of course vulnerable itself gives us another 20% here. And to put the cherry on the cake, we use the Undying Vampiric Power here. With our very high attack speed, this gives us a crazy life leech, pretty much makes us able to face tank all the mobs we want for an unlimited amount of time. Okay, let's go through the skill tree. We just take a random basic skill to get access to our core skills. Then we max out Frozen Orb with Enhanced Frozen Orb and Greater Frozen Orb. We max out Ice Shards with Enhanced Ice Shards and Greater Ice Shards. Then we put 1 point into Elemental Attunement, 3 points into Glass Cannon, pretty basic stuff. We do not put any points into Flame Shield, Teleport and Ice Armor because we have it on our amulet with a +3. If you don't have a +3, you put 1 point into each of these here. Then we put 1 point into Frost Nova, 1 point into Enhanced Frost Nova and 1 point into Mystical Frost Nova to apply the Vulnerable. We put 3 points into Precision Magic, since this is a lucky hit based build, 1 point into Align the Elements, 3 points into Protection and 3 points into Mana Shield. If you don't have a +3 defensive amulet, you can take the 3 points out of Mana Shield out and put them into Flame Shield, Teleport and Ice Armor. Then we put all points into our cold passives here, Cold Front, Snap Freeze and Icy Veil. Then Permafrost, Hoarfrost, Icy Touch and Frigid Breeze, everything gets maxed out. Try to get +3 Hoarfrost on your amulet, that is the best multiplier you can get for Ice Sorc. And then we take Deep Freeze with Prime Deep Freeze and Supreme Deep Freeze. And finally our key passive Avalanche, this helps us with getting free casts and keep our mana up. Also it does additional damage, which is also pretty handy, I guess. For the skill assignment, there's nothing new here. We just take the Deep Freeze as our ultimate, which resets our cooldown and also does damage and also freezes enemies to trigger our Ice-Shard enchantment. We take Frost Nova for defensive purposes and apply Vulnerable and also obviously instantly freeze everything around us to use the Ice-Shards enchantment. We take Teleport to get around faster. We take Flame Shield as our primary defensive skill here. Then we take Ice Shards as our offensive skill. Ice Armor, pretty much another defensive skill, which is really nice if you are doing permanent damage. You have a 100% uptime on a really big barrier. Then our Ice-Shards enchantment, obviously this is an Ice-Shard build, and since we have a very high attack speed, we can greatly benefit from the Frozen Orb enchantment here as well. Let's do legendary aspects, so let's start with the offensive ones. We take the aspect of Piercing Cold. This one is pretty much mandatory for any Ice-Shard build. Try to get one with 4 pierces, this is much stronger than having one with 3. The damage doesn't really matter on this one here. Then we take the Conceited Aspect, which gives us up to 25% damage increase while we have an active barrier. We take the aspect of Frozen Orbit, this gives us significantly more damage on Frozen Orb's explosion. Then we take the aspect of Frozen Memories, this gives us another charge whenever our Avalanche Key passive triggers, and this is very, very important so we can stay up on our mana pool because we have a very high attack speed here. And then we take the Stormswell aspect on our amulet. This gives us up to 45% damage to vulnerable enemies. And last but not least, we take the aspect of Control for another up to 35% damage to frozen enemies. And you can switch this with the amulet. I just like to have the Stormswell on the amulet because it gives me more boss damage outside of the stagger phases. Then for all our other aspects, we have the aspect of Fortune, which gives us another 20% lucky hit chance. This is for a lucky hit build really not mandatory, but it really helps. Then we take the Snowbelt aspect for some additional armor, and also we don't really have any better aspect to use at this point since we are not using any unique items. Then we use the aspect of Disobedience. This is also pretty much mandatory for, well, like every build. And last but not least, we use the aspect of Shared Misery. This also is pretty much mandatory for any kind of crowd control based build. Next, let's do the item and stat priorities. As I already said, this is a lucky hit based build, but now we have the tier 100 variant, so we really want to have some specific, especially defensive stats here. So for our helmet, we want to have total armor, maximum life, and you want to have lucky hit and crowd control duration, or lucky hit and cooldown reduction. As you can see, my piece is not really great, but you know, that's it. On our armor, we just want defensives, we want total armor, maximum life, damage reduction, and maybe a resistance stat or whatever you need to make yourself more tanky. On our gloves, we want ideally attack speed, lucky hit chance, ice shards, and frozen orb. Critical strike chance is okay, but attack speed is definitely the one you want to prefer. Hands, again, just defensives. I have total armor, max life, damage close, damage distant. You can also have damage reduction, any kind of resistance or whatever helps your build here again. On our boots, we want to have movement speed, mana cost reduction, ranks of flame shield ideally, and also ideally movement speed after killing an elite is pretty nice. You can also have a different 4 stat here, of course. On our wand, we want to have all stats, core skill damage, main stat, and another damage stat. Doesn't really matter which one here. Amulet, the optimal amulet here would be movement speed, ranks to defensive skills, ranks to Hoar Forest, and percent intelligence. So this one is actually pretty nice, I guess. On your rings, you want to have critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, resource generation, or maximum mana. And the other stat is pretty much most likely maximum life is the best you can get. For the second ring, same story, lucky hit chance, resource generation, or maximum mana, critical strike chance, and max life. And for our focus, we want to ideally have lucky hit 1 or 2 times if possible. Mana cost reduction, cooldown reduction is great, resource generation is great, so all these stats work just fine. So for Vampiric Powers, we have 4 which are active all the time and 1 which is a little bit situational. So let's go to the main Vampiric Powers first. We have Undying. This is like the Life Leech is really, really nice with high attack speed. This is just a great power overall. Then we have Ravenous. That is the attack speed power. I think every single attack speed based build will be using this. We have the Prey on the Weak, which makes all enemies affected by Vampiric Curse vulnerable. This allows us to spec away from destructive ice shards, as already explained in the intro. And we have the Accursed Touch, which puts Vampiric Curse on all the enemies and also increases the soul's damage by 200%. So Accursed Touch together with the Prey on the Weak pretty much gives like this nice little vulnerable on all enemies mechanic we are using here. And the last one is kind of situational. You can use Domination, for example, if you're like farming and not doing like tier 100s, or if you feel like your defenses are good enough, you can certainly get away with using Domination. If you feel like you need a little bit more tankiness, you can definitely go for Resilience here. And if you want to fight like bosses in single target, as I said, the single target damage here is not that great, you can definitely switch over to Infection. This gives a nice little damage boost on bosses. I wouldn't say it doubles it, but you're probably gonna make like 20 to 30% more damage on bosses with doing Infection here. The Paragon Board is now completely optimized to get as much multiplicative damage modifiers as possible. On the first board, we take the Elementalist Glyph with just 40 intelligence, because in this case we really just want to have the multiplicative bonus of up to 15%. And moving over to the next board, that is the Icefall board. And we use the Frostbite Glyph here for a maximum damage increase against Chilled. We just pick up the damage to chilled node here and the damage to chilled node here. We don't pick up the damage reduction nodes. If you again struggle with survivability, you can just modify it a little bit to get this damage reduction node and this damage reduction node. They're not very far away. You can definitely sacrifice some damage elsewhere. And we use the legendary node here, the Icefall node. This gives us 15% damage increase to vulnerable and 30% damage increase to frozen. So this is like a very, very strong legendary node. And moving over to the next board, that is going to be the Enchantment Master board. We pick up all these non-physical damage clusters here. And then we put in the Winter Glyph here. This gives us another 15% multiplicative damage. And moving over to the next board, we use the Keysler's Conduit board. This one we pretty much just use for the damage to elite nodes here. And the Glyph socket, because this has like 44 dexterity. Actually, it has 49, but we didn't pick one note here because it's not so important on the exploit glyph here, and we needed the point elsewhere. So you can probably get away with even removing more points from here if you need them somewhere else, but I removed this point because this actually needs 2 notes for just, I believe it's like 6% or something like that. 7%, right? So you can definitely change some points here if you like to. Then moving over to the next board, that is the Burning Instinct board. This one is just really solely for the glyph socket. So we just pick up the glyph socket with 49 dexterity for our control glyph. This gives us a 10 or 20% multiplier for chilled and frozen, and nice damage boost to crowd controlled enemies. And then let's move on to the last board, that is the Frigid Fate board. We pick up the Frigid Fate note here as well. You can get up to 30% bonus damage from this one here. And what we do is pick up the lucky hit chance here. If you feel like you don't need it, you can spec away from this node and put them somewhere else. And then here again we just take the glyph socket to put in the tactician for another 10% damage multiplier. We don't really care too much about these vulnerable damage nodes, we just pick it up, and that is going to be it. And that's it for the build guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. And now I actually have 3 Nightmare dungeons here. I have the Leviathan's Maw dungeon and I have the Flooded Depths dungeon. These are both without bosses, so these are optimal Nightmare dungeons. Because remember, the boss HP is pretty high tuned this season, I feel like. And the Ice-Shards single target is just not that great. But in case you're curious how great it actually is, you can check out the 3rd Nightmare dungeon at the very end. There you will see an actual boss fight using this build as well. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you so much for watching, and make sure to check my new build guides coming up. I have more Sorceress builds coming up very soon here.
I'm not ready yet. I need time to prepare. I need time to prepare that. I need time to do that. I need more time. I'm not ready yet. I need time to prepare. More time.